Loss is not just going to make you a great fighter. There's a lot of other stuff that goes into it, and you'll see that throughout this video. Anyway, let's just get into it. Going up in the S tier, I'm just going to say, maybe not the S tier, but I'll say very suspicious tier, Josh Emmett. Josh Emmett has gyno that you could see from 100 miles away. I call him the gyno gladiator. The gyno.
I don't think that's suspicious at all. I think that's probably the most obvious. That's the most obvious fighter that's obviously on something. I would say Josh Emmett is obviously on something. I don't know what it is. He's on freaking Trembolone. He's taking Trembolone sandwiches or something, but he's on something definitely, no doubt about it.
I know Goblin. And Josh Emmett has a telltale sign, and he also happens to have some of the nastiest power we've ever seen in the featherweight division, which is a weight class where people usually don't carry that type of power because of how light they are. I'm not saying Josh Emmett is a small person. He's pretty dense, but at the same time, it's like, it's just a coincidence that he happens to have some of the most suspicious gyno in the UFC, and I don't know, his power is on par with it. Okay, so I'm gonna have to say
I disagree with this one. I think that this Josh Emmett guy, he should definitely be at S tier.
Hey, Josh Emmett is a very suspicious guy when it comes to his gyno. Next up, I'm just gonna have to say it. What's more suspicious than gyno? Droopage in one part of your chest only. Israel Adesanya.
I mean that's gyno too. That's gyno too though. But yeah, Israel Adesanya, I could definitely believe if he's on some sort of steroids, without a doubt.
It's the most suspicious gyno I've ever seen in my entire life. I don't know how it's possible that in his early 30s, long after puberty, this guy would show up with a boob on one pec only. All right, that means that there's a whole lot of imbalance going on in this guy's hormones. He tried to blame it on weed. There's just no way. Listen,
man, don't blame it on the reef. Don't blame it on the reef. Nah, this is straight up. It's straight up something.
Weed might give you a little bit of estrogen. It may give you a little bit of a puffy nipple shit going on, but it's not going to give you this look. I mean, look at this, man. It's drooping down 100 yards. I don't think Adesanya is necessarily on shit right now. I mean, if you look at his performance when he showed up with a boob, it happened to be his most impressive performance ever. And a part of that is because he's just really solid and he was hungry. And
I don't think that these fighters know like how to do actual real PCTs. And for those of you guys that don't know what PCTs is, like post psychotherapy, because yeah, like this obvious gyno, like it's something that they should really look into. Post psychotherapy is definitely a real thing. I used to do I used to be really into like fitness and like bodybuilding and shit like that, but there's definitely some therapy that you can do to not get gyno like this, and I'm pretty sure that like fighters aren't even aware that that's a thing.
Costa motivated him to get up for that fight. He was also in his prime, and Costa's just not that good, and Adesanya, I believe, always beats Paulo Costa's ass, but he had nasty power in that fight, and he had a fucking boob. The second he walked out, I was like, what the hell is this? What is going on? All right, and where's Paulo Costa out? Let me get Costa on this list. I'm going to put Costa in the very suspicious tier. Now, people are going to roll their eyes and say, oh, how do you say Izzy's in the S tier?
He's ultra suspicious. I think that he's even, you know, with the whole like secret juice thing, I'm pretty sure that he's like even hinting at it himself, and he's just like trying to meme it out. But yeah, I think that Paulo Costa is definitely on something.
Or not Paulo Costa. Just because you're jacked does not necessarily mean you're on sauce. Now, let me just say this, okay? Let me just say this. I'm going to put Yoel in this tier too. It's not just about how you look. There are some fighters in the UFC that don't look impressive that could be on stuff. I mean, look at athletes like Lance Armstrong. You don't have to be big to be on sauce.
Well, they're like on other different steroids, because what Lance Armstrong is on, he's on like he's on a type of steroid, like a type of enhancement that pretty much you don't get tired. I think I heard this a long time ago. There's a whole bunch of fighters out there that fake that they have asthma, and they take like a steroid or an enhancement that pretty much it affects the way that you breathe, so you don't get tired as much, right? So if I think this is from an actual like soccer team. It was like Arsenal or like one of those Premier League teams where 80% 80% of the entire freaking team, or like 90% of the entire freaking team, is like apparently has asthma, right? And they're taking an enhancement that pretty much allows their lungs to work in a way where they just don't get tired. So there's different types of enhancements. Uh, Obviously, like it depends on like what steroid you're taking and for what reason. Different enhancements and different steroids do different things.
And for example, Sean O'Malley and his buddy Kyler Phillips
When did Sean O'Malley pop for steroids?
have popped in the past. If you guys don't remember, O'Malley served a 2-year suspension. I think Kyler Phillips recently served about a year suspension for taking something, I believe it was called Ostarine. They don't look that impressive as fighters. Now,
I think Ostarine is it's an enhancement. I think that it causes you to not lose as much muscle mass whenever you're cutting. I'm pretty sure that's what Ostarine is, but I could be wrong.
Kyler Phillips was like so explosive in his fights with Song Yadong, where he beat Song, and you could see like, damn, maybe he's kind of declined a little bit as far as his quick twitch ability, but both of those guys don't look all that impressive. But they have literally popped before. Does that mean that they're on stuff now? Not necessarily. In the same way that Adesanya has never popped, but that fight would cost, dude, come on. He must have been on stuff.
There has to be a method. There has to be a method, because I'm pretty sure that like at the highest level of combat sports, like these fighters are fighting for like millions of dollars. They're fighting for opportunities to be like multi-millionaires. Like it wouldn't be a surprise to me if these guys aren't doing everything that it takes for them to be successful at what they do. And I'm pretty sure that even some fighters would go into the realm of taking enhancements, but there has to be a method that's known out there that they probably pay for, that pretty much, you know, it'll counter the effects, or like there'll be no evidence that they're on some type of gear or like some type of enhancement.
Does that mean he's on sauce right now? Not exactly. He might not be. He's not looked as physically impressive in some of his other fights. He's not showed up with a boob in some of his other fights, and you know, he's not had the same speed. So there's a chance that he has declined a little bit in his physicality. Maybe because he got off the sauce, and when you get off the sauce, your hormones decline below the normal levels.
Here's one thing you need to do before you buy anything.
Oh my God, I'm not gonna buy
Don't
into
spend
this.
another dime on Amazon.
That they were at before you hopped on. But back to Yoel Romero and Paulo Costa. I think it's very possible to look like Yoel and Paulo Costa naturally.
I do agree. I think that it's possible to look like Paulo Costa if you're like training really, really hard and have a super strict diet. But in my opinion, for that muscle mass, I don't know, it's pretty hard. It would be pretty freaking hard.
Okay? But where it gets suspicious is looking like Yoel and Paulo Costa as a professional.
And for those of you guys that don't know, whenever you start taking steroids, the first thing that pops up, like the first things that develop when you're on steroids is your traps and the muscles in your freaking head. Like this dude has like a perfectly shaped round head. And also I think there's like a rumor out there that says that whenever you're on gear, you start going bald. I don't know how true that is, but one thing that I do know for sure is that whenever you start taking stuff, your traps are the first thing to come.
Mixed martial arts fighter. In Yoel's case, he used to be an Olympic wrestler. If you're just a guy that has phenomenal genetics and you lift weights, you can look like Yoel Romero. Same thing with Paulo Costa. You have to have insane genetics, obviously. But the fact that these guys...
Yeah, 100% for sure. Like, when people take steroids, a lot of the times they could achieve like the physique that they want naturally, but of course having God-given genetics is gonna help whenever you're taking steroids. So like having God-given genetics plus being on steroids is gonna give you a freak physique, a crazy physique. What's up, Mason?
Guys have good cardio and they're always grappling and hitting pads and doing a bunch of endurance work. That's where it gets weird. In Yoel's case, the fact that he still looks so crazy at an old age also could be a sign. But if you know Mike O'Hearn, I don't know if you guys know who Mike O'Hearn is. Mike O'Hearn is this guy that claimed
Baby, don't hurt me.
Cincinnati in the fitness industry. It's a total joke at this point. I mean, here's a photo of him. You know this guy's on some shit.
Yo, and rest in peace, Rich Piana.
But his argument to defend himself, because he won't just admit it, is, listen, I've been lifting for 30 years. All right. You know anyone on sauce? You know anyone on PEDs that's been doing it for 30 years and can maintain their strength and their look? No, these guys always come crashing down eventually.
Bro, Michael Hearn is like the most obvious example of he's not even a fighter. He's like a model, but he's the most obvious example of a person who is obviously on Trenbolone. He's obviously taking these Trenbolone sandwiches, and he's on test without a doubt.
There's something to be said about that. Mike O'Hearn is...
But he does... I mean, I will admit, Michael Hearn definitely knows about PCT because he has absolutely no freaking gyno in these images.
Much
unless they're Photoshopped.
More unnatural compared to Yoel Romero. Absolutely. And Yoel Romero's physicality, the way that he does all of his flips, and he's just a freak athlete in general. Without the sauce, he'd be a crazy athlete. And yeah, you know, he looks great in his 40s. I don't think you can take sauce consistently for that long and not have some bad side effects unless you have elite genetics. There are some guys that can take it for 30 years and not have bad side effects. So Mike O'Hearn, sorry, you're on sauce, but you're just genetically gifted too.
Of course.
But Yoel, I'm not 100% convinced, okay? Like, this guy is a special athlete. His durability in and of itself is one of the things that lets me believe that he could not be on something, because sauce, it'll help you recover fast, but it won't necessarily give you like an inhuman chin. You know what I mean? So Yoel, I'm suspicious of because
that's true.
You know,
that's
he was
true.
on the Cuban Olympic team and he's competing at an insanely high level in his 40s when most guys' testosterone.
Bro, and you know what's crazy? Joel Romero got he won his last fight. What was it? It was Bellator versus PFL, and he won his last fight in a pretty decent fashion. You know what I'm saying? So Joel Romero, whether he's on gear or not, man, he's still performing at a high freaking level.
Starts to plummet, and even though he's been looking amazing for a long time, he could just have really good genetics to where he's not going to crash from being on stuff for a long time. His health would be just fine. And Paulo Costa's a similar case. You could look like him naturally if you have great genetics and you train, but for him, he has good cardio. All right, let's get on to the next one. Holly Holm, in her 40s, has capped delts, super jacked as a female.
Dang, I never thought about Holly Holm, but yeah, I think she's on estrogen blockers. I wouldn't say that she's probably on like some crazy steroids, but I mean, yeah, of course, like she's probably taking like some tests, you know, but definitely estrogen blockers, because she even has, you know what I'm saying? She has some of those that look that I was telling you guys about. Whenever you guys first hop on gear, you start developing these muscles in your face that give you like a masculine look. And obviously the traps, they start popping in. Those are the first things that come in whenever you first hop on gear. So for Holly Holm, man, if I had to make a prediction on what she's taking, I'm probably guessing maybe some estrogen blockers and some tests, without a doubt.
It's one thing if you have great genetics and you're a girl and you happen to put on a little bit more muscle, but for Holly, it's like this lean, dry look. You know what I mean? That she just happens to be able to maintain often. Women in general have a harder time getting super lean.
Exactly.
They just store more fat.
100%. True.
But in Holly's case, it's like she's always very lean. And she has like a vascularity and her neck is huge. I mean, I don't know. I think
well, the vascularity might be because, you know, they do dehydrate themselves to a point of almost freaking dying to make the weights. But yeah, it's kind of fishy that she still has a lot of vascularity and a lot of striations in her muscles. Yeah, it's just weird. Red flag, but interesting call out. 100%.
It's very suspicious. Usman or Magomedov? I think, well, listen, he popped and he's literally serving a suspension right now. So there's nothing more we need to say about it.
Well, here's the thing, man. I feel like if Usman popped, I mean, there has to be like a regular practice of I mean, I'm not accusing any Dagestani or any Russian fighter out there, but there has to be like a common practice, of hopping on some gear. That's all I'm gonna say.
That's just how it is. Jose Aldo. I think Jose Aldo is going to have to make this list just because of how suspicious looking his delts are. All right, Jose Aldo's back, his delts. There's a certain 3D look to him that it just kind of sounds the alarm a little bit, right? For example, it's one thing if you're lean and you have like some delts that are popping when you have a pump. But in Aldo's case, you look at him in the cage, his delts are literally like boulders popping out of his shoulders. Of course, he's just super explosive and fast twitch, and that's genetic too. Again, all of these guys that look really impressive, if they were natural, they might literally be natural too. Even if they're on.
I mean, yeah. I mean, Jose Aldo, yeah, he's like in the low key sus. You know what I'm saying? He's low key sus, but let's also mention the fact that he's from Brazil, and Brazilian fighters, people from Thailand, people from Holland, they're all notoriously known for being on gear. I mean, that's just not that's not surprising to hear. Whenever we go to tournaments for MMA or kickboxing or Muay Thai, a lot of people pop, and a lot of people that do pop, they're from these countries, so they have a very, very strong reputation of being on gear, which is pretty interesting.
Sauce, if they were natty, they could still look impressive due to their genetics. I'm sure Aldo is really genetically gifted, but there's just something about his physique. But I'm not going to say high suspicion because, again, I just think that he might just be really gifted genetically. Movsar Evloev, dude. So let me just explain this. I think Movsar is very suspicious.
Another Russian fighter, by the way.
Movsar competed with Arnold Allen recently, and Arnold Allen is a really big, jacked featherweight. But Arnold Allen in the cage, he's like a very wide guy. He has a wide structure. Evloev has a little bit more narrow shoulders. But Allen looks very natural. His muscularity is a little bit more flat from his weight cut, from all the training he's doing. There's just something a lot more natty about Arnold Allen's look. Evloev has this like filled out, shredded, dry, insanely vascular look. Very full. You go through a harsh weight.
If building a side hustle business interests you, keep watching. If not, click skip video.
Cut. You're doing all this endurance.
By the way, I don't have an ad blocker on here because literally YouTube, anyway, different topic for a different video, but you literally cannot freaking live stream without activating your ad blocker. It's so annoying.
Training in Evloev's case, he has great cardio. He's constantly grappling, and I know that grappling gives you like a pretty good physique. You have to be very strong. A lot of wrestlers have really strenuous strength and conditioning routines, but for Evloev, I don't know. There's usually a bit of a give and a take. This is the thing about Aldo, and the same thing with Yoel, for example. With Yoel and Aldo, those guys are insanely jacked, but they never had great gas tanks, right? Yoel always had to be low output, and he always had to manage his gas tank because he would gas out. Usually when you have a ton of muscle, the consequence to that is you'll have lactic acid buildup, and your muscles will feel heavy as soon as you really start to work hard and throw a bunch of punches and stuff like that. The same thing with Aldo. Wasn't
interesting. That's very interesting. From my understanding, I think that whenever you're on gear and you know what I'm saying, you are building up that lactic acid. But from my understanding, I'm pretty sure that for a lot of steroids out there, you're able to produce, in a way, more energy to have a higher tolerance to building more lactic acid, because as soon as you like lay down, go to sleep, you recover faster.
Known for having like the best gas tank, kind of slowed down in the later rounds of his 5-rounder fights. But for Evloev, he's just, from the moment the fight starts to the very end of it, on point with his gas tank. He has like a very high output style as well. Capped delts. There's just something weird with Evloev's physique. Next up, we have Aleski dos Santos. Has literally popped in the past, so I'm not just like, right now I'm very sure that he has been on stuff in the past. He has telltale signs, capped, dealt.
Bro, everybody who's popped, they're like fighters who are extremely competitive. So that's why I wouldn't be surprised if there's fighters out there who are on steroids that we don't even freaking know about, or have never popped, or if they do pop, you know, I don't know, the UFC probably does something to cover it up. But all of these guys, like Sean and all of these rest of these guys, they're like up there, right, in terms of competition. So it wouldn't be a surprise to me if
Massive
the other competition is already on gear.
traps, which are usually a part of the body that has a lot of androgenic receptors. Where if
Exactly.
you hop on stuff,
100%.
those are usually one of the first muscles to blow up a lot.
Yes.
I'm not sure if he's on sauce right now, but in the past when he was fighting, he's knocked out Strickland, for example. This is the guy that beat the fuck out of Benoit Saint Denis. He not only had tons of power, but he also had really good cardio and a great gas tank. So William Knight, I have to say William Knight. I'm sorry, I think he's in the S tier. William Knight
Yes.
is far too jacked to not be on stuff. And there is something to be said about his atrocious gas tank. This guy, like, after he throws a few combinations, starts
Unless this guy like trains like a bodybuilder and trains for hypertrophy and like protein muscle synthesis, this dude is obviously on trend, bro. This guy should be the poster boy of Trembolone sandwiches.
huffing and puffing, and he looks like he can barely move. But he has like 25-inch arms. All right? He literally looks like an off-season professional bodybuilder.
Exactly.
For sure. I mean, you could say
100%.
again, horrible gas tank. He might just have insane genetics. I'm sure he has insane genetics, but explain the gyno. All right? Explain the gyno as well. You know, he's comically massive. Comically massive. He's probably on shit. I think he benches 4+ plates.
That's
And for a
insane.
martial artist, that's kind of nuts.
That's
All right, now
insane.
again, there are people that get on sauce that will never bench 4 plates. But as a pro MMA fighter in the UFC, you're benching 4 plates, you have gyno, and you have like the physique of an off-season IFBB pro. Something's going on.
That's true.
Next up, John Jones. Literally has popped in the past. The UFC literally had.
I was waiting for
this.
I was
Okay.
I thought that he was gonna mention John Jones like later on in the video because he's probably like most obvious. And you know, like, obviously John Jones has already popped for gear. So
They had to move an entire UFC event to a whole other location. They had to rent a whole other stadium for John Jones because he was pulsating picograms. All right. And the Athletic Commission in Las Vegas could not allow him to compete in the state of Nevada. And so they had to literally move. Okay. Brian Ortega, I'm going to put him in the literally pop tier.
He's
After
popped?
his UFC debut, he popped and served a suspension. So he's got to be in that tier as well.
I did not know that Brian, the Eagle Man Ortega, popped for PED. That's crazy.
Josh Quinlan has literally popped after his first UFC.
No way, bro. Like these are all names that I did not think were on PED. That's
fight. He served a
crazy.
long suspension. And now we must get back to some people that are very suspicious. Merab Dvalishvili. CEO
Georgian
VPO.
fighter.
Maybe. Okay? Now, let me just say this. You could be on all the EPO in the world. You're never going to have a gas tank like Merab. Part of that is just genetic. Right? Demetrius Johnson was asking Merab about his cardio routine and whatnot. And it's like, there's just no fucking point. Yes,
That's true, bro. I thought that was pretty. Marab about his gas tank. Marab just gave him like the run of the mill response. Oh man, I worked so hard. I put so much time in the gym. You know what I'm saying? Like, okay, bro. Like, what's the program? Like, that's exactly what DJ was asking. Like, bro, what's your program? And he was just like, man, just work hard. Which was like, okay.
You know, let me take that back. Obviously, Merab's style of training helps him with his cardio. If he's not training well, he doesn't have the same gas tank. But, you know, you can take all of his advice, you'll never have his gas tank. You can take all the sauce you want, you'll never have his gas tank. He's just a freak. So credit to Merab, just like credit to all these other good fighters that have done good stuff. Adesanya showing up with a boob still had a great performance because he was really skilled. But
Exactly.
especially when we know there's a high likelihood that at the highest level in any sport, people are taking stuff. You're going to tell me that the guy with the most freakish gas tank,
The highest level of soccer, they have EPOs. The highest level of basketball, there's players that have popped. The highest level of even volleyball players have popped. So like, yes, 100% agree. At the highest level of any sport, when it comes to physical, a physical advantage, there's definitely gonna be some people who are gonna definitely try to be on some sort of enhancements.
Think we've ever seen. You could bring up TJ Dillashaw, who popped for stuff in the past, like EPO.
Oh yeah,
you could bring up
true.
other guys. None of them have a gas tank like Merab. You're telling me that this is not suspicious? Again, I don't really care. I'm not getting into the weeds with all this. I'm not going to ruin my enjoyment of the sport. I'm not going to look at Merab versus O'Malley and be like, well, Merab's on stuff and O'Malley's probably... It's just a stylistic thing as well. But come on. Merab's not even the most skilled grappler. He's not even the most skilled striker. He's actually probably not top 5 in any of those categories in his division, but he destroys people because of his cardio. He might be on shit. Okay? I know he's born in an elevated area in Georgia.
True.
He may have a third lung, but...
If you don't know how to make chords, this is it. Congratulations. The chords are already made for you.
We can
I cannot help but put him on this list. Vitor Petrino. I'm putting him on the S tier, okay? People talk about TRT Vitor. TRT Vitor is a small fry compared to Vitor Petrino. And they've literally competed in the same division. Now, to be fair, Vitor spent a lot of time in his career at middleweight. But Vitor Petrino looks like he could be competing in the Olympia for classic physique if he just cuts maybe a few more pounds. Now, once again, if this was a guy that only lifted weights, that was the only thing that he did, and he just ate like 5 meals a day, I'd be like, all right, he could be natural. He could just have insane genetics. 100%. But there's a bunch of things that go into this. He's an MMA fighter that does a lot of cardio work and does a lot of strength and conditioning. And
100%. Like, people are like missing out. Like, oh, these guys are just cut because they work out so much, bro. Like, no, like, there's a difference between having a protein muscle synthesis to build muscle and then having to do all the agility work and all the cardio work. Like, that literally burns your muscles out. So it's kind of weird to have a professional MMA fighter to have this much density in their muscles. It's just weird. You know what I'm saying?
he's hitting pads, and he doesn't even have that bad of a gas tank. He has a pretty good gas tank. I think he's on shit. All right. This guy's quads are insane. His physique is crazy. So, yeah, I think that Vitor is probably on shit. And again, with these Brazilian fighters, let me just say this. I don't think USADA or whoever's testing these days loves going to Brazil. All right. There are just some areas that people...
Thank you. I was literally just saying this earlier. Like, places like Brazil, Thailand, Russia, like, those are all places in the world where people are... They're known for being on shit.
are going to want to avoid.
It's like a regular thing for them, if I'm just being completely honest.
It's harder to find people. Just like, you know, imagine this. It's really good to avoid USADA if you're training in the mountains in Mexico. And Yair Rodriguez happened to be out of the cage for like a year and a half at one point, and no one knew why. And he happened to be training in the mountains in the middle of nowhere. All right. It's going to be hard to find some of these guys. The UFC and USADA, they have no issue finding O'Malley. They have no issue finding Kyler Phillips in Arizona. It's going to be a little bit harder to find where Vitor's at. And even if you know where he's at, you don't want to go to the favelas. All right. He might not even live in the favelas, but where does he live? I don't know, but it might be near there. For someone like O'Malley and Kyler Phillips that have literally popped in the past, the UFC has no issue going to Arizona, wherever they're at in Arizona. No issue. Usman or Magomedov, I mean, might be a little bit harder to catch people in Dagestan, but at the same time, he trains at AKA. And I'm pretty sure that's where he probably popped. Same thing with Jones and Ortega and Quinlan. And that kind of brings me to this. Jilton Almeida literally lives in the favelas. Jilton Almeida is not getting caught by USADA, but
this dude is old as shit and has this much muscle mass, by the way. Like, he's old as fuck.
He happens to be the most suspicious guy in the UFC. If there's anyone that I would bet is probably on shit, it's Jilton Almeida. Okay? Jilton is in his early 30s and he looks like he's 50 years old. His face looks like it's made out of leather. His head has literally grown.
Yeah. Whenever you first hop on steroids, like it's a known thing that like I've been saying this all over and over again, but I just want you guys to understand this. Your traps and your facial is the first thing that you'll be like, holy shit! Like this guy has like a perfectly shaped head. Guy has a perfectly shaped head, and his face is just his neck is as wide as his face. His traps are freaking huge.
Made out of leather. His head has literally grown over the years. I'm gonna try to pull up an old photo of him on screen where he was much skinnier.
Damn! Holy!
And his head was smaller. And you look at these photos of Jilton Almeida. Again, we talk about Vitor Petrino and how he mogs TRT Vitor back in the day, and how if he lost like 10 more pounds and he got a little bit leaner, he could compete. Jilton Almeida on the Dana White Contender Series or cutting down to 205 would be a bodybuilder. Jilton Almeida is like 220 pounds after cutting a lot of weight to get down to 205, and he looks like this. He looks like he's dry, he's full, he's shredded to the fucking gills, and now he's at heavyweight. And you know, sometimes people put on a lot of fat and they look much less impressive. And sometimes if you have really good genetics, you'll get lean and you look kind of saucy, but then you start to bulk up and people realize, oh, it's actually just his insertions when they're lean and there's not a lot of fat on them that makes him look impressive. But with Jilton, he puts on fat and everything just blows up even more. I have to say that Jilton Almeida is on stuff, okay? Again,
bro, that's insane. That picture that he brought up a couple minutes ago, Jilton Almeida, he looks like a kid. And now, this was only a couple years ago. Where was it? Oh man, it's so crazy.
Endurance athletes with great cardio and whatnot, and I'm not saying UFC fighters are just endurance athletes. They have to be explosive, but the cardio that you need to go a hard 5 rounds taking down Derek Lewis, you know, you're probably not going to have that much of a full look. You're going to be a little bit drained, a little bit stringy. Even if you have a lot of muscle, Jilton Almeida just simply looks too full, too dry to dismiss. Kamaru Usman, very suspicious.
Kamaru Usman is very, very suspicious. He has a whole lot of freaking back acne that I don't know if anybody has ever called this out, but he has acne in very suspicious places. And acne is a side effect of being on steroids because your body is just freaking messed up. Your hormones are messed up. So acne is something that I've seen on Kamaru Usman where I was just like, damn, I think that's like an obviously telltale sign that, you know, he's probably on something.
All right. Some people might say that he should be in the S tier. People bring up acne all the time with Usman. Acne on his stomach, acne on his back. First of all, acne is not always the sign. There are plenty of people that are natural that have acne. I have a bunch of acne on my back in the winter. As soon as the summer hits and I get more sunlight and I clean up my diet a little bit, I have literally zero acne. And I look a lot more impressive in the summer because I'm leaner and I'm more active in the gym, right? But in the winter, I am less active in the gym. I don't look as impressive, but I have acne. And that's just how it is sometimes. Acne is not a thing that people only have when they're like going through puberty or they're 18. There are plenty of people in the UFC that have acne that are not on anything. Kamaru could be that guy. But then you talk about like the dots on his stomach.
Yes, this is what I'm talking about. Like he has weird spots on his stomach and throughout his entire body. I don't know. It looks like a red flag to me.
It's always a little bit of a weird thing. You look at people like Jilton and guys that are very lean, and whenever they have like bubbly dots on their stomach, it's a little bit strange, okay? Because that is a common injection site for people that take HGH. And then you think about his dad.
HGH is human growth hormone.
Having a corrupt his dad being a corrupt pharmacist. So if you don't know about that, Kamaru Usman's dad was a pharmacist that happened to be a corrupt pharmacist and spent many years in jail for it. So there's also that. And Usman also has some of the craziest cardio that we've ever seen. And he happens to be jacked. Okay? And he was also knocking dudes out in his prime. So Usman is very suspicious. And people say that his head has grown too. I don't know how accurate that is. I'm just not ready to put him in the S tier. I'm not ready. I don't know why.
Daily reminder that Epstein didn't off himself.
I just don't think that there's enough. Like, people bring up the knees, for example, and they say,
Let me show you how we do stuff around here.
Jesus.
My department uses Monday.com, so I'm good.
Work
Usman has horrible knees. He's always been hurting on them. I usually call them wobblestone, cobblestone knees because they are very wobbly and they almost look like they're made out of cobblestones. But people act like, oh, how does he have a great gas tank, but he can't run? Because he's always talking about, I can't run. When I walk on grass, it hurts. I don't think running is the best cardio for MMA, right? The best cardio for MMA, and people that actually train and compete will probably agree with this, is hitting pads really hard.
I think the best cardio for MMA literally is hitting pads in a way where you're freaking running or like in the cage and you have somebody who's going like, oh, kick, 1, 2, 1, 2, and you're just there following him. That is super freaking tiring. You guys have no freaking idea. Yeah, I mean, running for cardio for like combat sports, it's not terrible. It's not bad. I think it's decent. You know, road work is definitely something that every fighter should be doing. It's a good base for like cardiovascular exercising. But yeah, it's not the best for combat sports. I agree with that.
Sparring hard, okay, or at a high pace, at least sparring at a high pace, and grappling, doing a lot of grappling work, just actually going through the motions that you would use in a fight, but doing it for long periods of time, going hard. If you run, for example, and you're like a long distance runner and you like doing your 10, 15 miles, you'll have a good gas tank for sure. But if you're not used to hitting pads and you try to hit pads hard for 5 minutes, you'll be completely winded.
100%.
Just because
100%.
it's a totally different style of cardio.
Bro, has Lucas ever trained? Because this guy, he talks like he knows what he's doing.
It's very explosive. It's high intensity interval training. It's just different. And it is possible that Usman, even though he doesn't run, he can still do a lot of bike, elliptical stuff, and he could just train really hard on the pads and just spar hard. It is possible. And again, I don't think acne's a telltale sign, but then you have the corrupt pharmacist. So, you know what? Maybe. But also, let me just say this. Being a corrupt pharmacist doesn't, like, first of all, I may not know enough about the situation, but being a corrupt pharmacist does not mean his dad was, like, teaching people how to use sauce, okay? I just don't know or how true it is that just because his dad was a corrupt pharmacist in some way means that part of his corruption was like getting a bunch of shit for his sons and teaching them how to use stuff and get away with it. So I'll just say
that would be extremely fucked up though. Like if Kamaru Usman was like getting taught how to use steroids by his own dad, like that'd be fucked up because I mean steroids has been proven to literally shorten your lifespan and increase your heartbeat rate and literally cause heart attacks. So it'd be pretty fucked up if your own father is teaching you how to shorten up your life.
But, you know, maybe. There's like a ton of telltale signs. There's a ton of them. All right? Being jacked, having that type of gas tank, it is very suspicious. And then he has the bubbles on his stomach. So for the benefit of the doubt for you guys that are suspicious of him, I'll say, all right, I could see it. And that's why he's in the very suspicious tier. I don't know if I'm ready to put him in the S tier. Like, I think showing up with one boob is more suspicious. I'm going to be honest. I think Jilton Almeida is more suspicious. I think Vitor Petrino has to be on shit. Okay? If he's an MMA fighter. If he's an MMA fighter, of course. Again, if he was just a bodybuilder. Same thing with Yoel Romero. Same thing with Jilton Almeida. If these guys were just lifting weights and they weren't doing all this cardio work, it'd be much easier to believe that they could be natty.
Yeah.
Because I know that when you have really good genetics, like, you know, you could look crazy.
True.
You could look crazy. Look at Ronnie Coleman, for example. Best bodybuilder ever. You're telling me this guy wouldn't look more impressive than everyone on this list if he was natty? I believe it. Like, Ronnie Coleman said that he didn't start taking stuff until, I think, the mid-90s. And if you look at photos of him in the early 90s when he first started competing, anyone in the right mind would say, if they don't know who he is, anyone in the right mind would be like, yeah, he's on steroids. He's on steroids. I just don't understand why he would lie about when he hopped on, because he's very honest about, oh, yeah, I got on this day. I remember it was this person at this event that told me about this stuff, and I started taking it. He's honest about that. Why would he lie? And also, if someone can get to this level
Lightweight, baby.
of a look, then they are genetically gifted. Imagine how crazy they would look if they're natural. They would look much more impressive than a bunch of people that are on sauce. Again, it goes back to the whole, just because you're on sauce does not mean you're going to be the best athlete. It doesn't mean you're going to have the most impressive look.
Yeah, buddy.
So it's possible that Kamaru Usman, just looks-wise, could be natty, but he happens to have the corrupt pharmacist stat and, you know, the
Yeah. So
crazy
and there's a lot of red flags with Kamaru Usman for sure.
gas tank, the bubbles on his stomach. But Vitor doesn't have as crazy of a gas tank as Usman, so fuck it. I'll put Usman in the S tier. Next up, Basil Hoffus. Dude, I mean, Jack Della Maddalena has a crazy physique. All right,
I would put him in the sus tier. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, I think he's in the sus tier for
BM's
sure.
pretty massive for the welterweight division. And I know that the lighting in this photo is a little bit different, but Basil Hoffus still is way more jacked than Jack Della Maddalena. His gas tank is crazy. He took a fight on short notice with him, and he just would not really slow down all that much in that fight. Fought with a very high pace. Apparently, he wasn't tested going into it, and you can
What?
check.
What? Is that true? This guy wasn't tested for steroids in a fight?
That online.
That's insane.
He might be on some shit. I'm not going to lie. He might be on some shit. Next up, we have another gyno gladiator, Dan Ige. Outside of the gyno, there's not a whole lot that makes me suspicious of Dan Ige, but he happens to have some crazy gyno. No one really talks about this as well. Same thing with Josh Emmett, but this type of gyno is usually a telltale sign, all right? This is like sauce gyno. And he happens to have ridiculous knockout power. I would even say he's up there with Josh Emmett and Ilia Topuria as far as his power goes. Maybe a little bit less, but he's one of the only guys that's really laying people out with one punch in that division.
Yeah.
So it is also just something to bring up.
Yeah, one of the smaller dudes to be sitting people down for sure. It's definitely a telltale sign. Well, not really like too much of a telltale sign, but it's a red flag for sure.
Loic Radzhabov, S tier. Loic Radzhabov looks like he's a mule, honestly, at this point. This guy just beat Al Salwati, who beat George Hardwick on the Contender Series, and I was picking Al Salwati. And Loic Radzhabov is super slow. He's like lethargic when he fights. He's plotty, but this guy has like the hunchback of Notre Dame.
Damn,
And
those are some big ass freaking traps. These traps are freaking huge.
I don't know. There's something about this guy. He looks like he's 60. No, not 60. He looks like he's 50. He's only like 33. So I just think he's probably on some shit. Okay, he's
Probably.
like a lab experiment. Next up, we have Islam Makhachev has literally popped.
No way.
So I'm going to have to put him in this tier as well with his boy Usman Nurmagomedov. This was way back in the day. I think it was like 2016 where Islam popped for something. Again, does it mean he's on stuff right now? Not necessarily.
That's crazy. Like, there's a whole bunch of names here and a whole bunch of faces that I didn't know popped for gear before. That's crazy. Eagle Man was definitely a surprise for me. Of course, we know John Jones, but Islam. When did Islam pop?
Jones, for example, let me just go back to him. Does it mean Jones is on stuff now? Not necessarily. So, yeah, there's that. But I have to put him in this tier, okay? I definitely have to. Oh, my goodness. Here we go. Highly suspicious, once again. I'm going to put Mateusz Rebecki on this list.
Rebecki.
This guy has a lot of telltale signs. First of all, he's in his early 30s, and I know that some guys start balding when they're in their 20s. And that just could be genetic. But not only does he have a hairline that's holding on for dear life, it's basically non-existent at this point. And I love it.
Here's a news flash, y'all. Uncle
Oh,
Sam
man.
is blessing us with a 5K spending card that is available for every
Mateusz Rebecki. He's one of my favorite fighters. And he has a lot of potential. One of the most interesting prospects in the UFC.
Oh, let me move this. Sorry.
But this guy's delts, his traps, his back, it's very
Yeah, man. These fucking traps, dog. Like, it's the first thing to come in whenever you're on
saucy.
gear.
All right. It's one thing, again, Arnold Allen versus Evloev. It's one thing if you're jacked like Arnold Allen, you have a wide frame. If you have a wide frame, that means you have a big structure to put a lot of muscle onto. For Evloev, he's like the smaller structure, but he's got tons of full, dry muscle that you wouldn't normally expect from someone that has a great gas tank. With Rebecki, phenomenal gas tank. Does have a wide frame, but again, his like shoulders and traps, they are really suspicious. I mean, he looks like he's very sauced up. Great gas tank, tons of power in his hands. From the grappling world as well, and a lot of those guys in the grappling world probably take shit. The jiu-jitsu community is just littered with people that are on stuff. They don't even
I mean, the jiu-jitsu community the reason why is because a lot of people that come from like these grappling backgrounds. I mean, I'm sure you guys have heard it before. At a lot of these competitions, they don't test for EPOs, they don't test for steroids, they don't test for any sorts of enhancements. Which is pretty crazy to me, given the fact that, it is considered a combat sport.
Test. Next up, Edson Barboza. I might put Edson Barboza in the very suspicious tier, okay? Because on one hand, he's not that big. If you look at him in the cage, even though he's like very impressive. On the other hand, you see photos like this of him in the offseason. He's still shredded, but he looks twice as big as he is in the cage. I don't know. There's something going on with Edson Barboza, all right? His delts are capped. He has the 3D look. He's extremely dry and shredded.
Damn, that's interesting. No, yeah, it does look like he did put on a little bit more of muscle mass, because this is an older picture of him. Like, this is him currently now. This is him like a couple years ago. But it does look like he put on a little bit of muscle, if I'm being honest.
All the time. Edson Barboza, if he was natty, listen, again, you can look like Edson naturally, but he's an MMA fighter that does all this cardio that happens to have like cap delts, and it's just a little bit strange. Next up, Conor McGregor, S tier. Conor literally admitted to being on sauce about a year ago. I don't remember the exact quote, but he basically admitted it on Twitter. I'll try to put it on screen right now.
It bothers the fuck out of me, like, that he pulled himself out of the USADA pool. There's only one reason you would do that. He's looking jacked as shit. You keep seeing videos of him flexing in front of mirrors and screaming, and he's huge. He healed really fast, like now. Yeah, but was Conor McGregor ever on steroids when he was competing in the UFC? I feel like that's a different question.
But Conor, we know after his injuries, leg injuries to be specific, that he had in the Dustin Poirier fights.
Damn. No, okay, yeah. Conor definitely on something, bro. This dude's freaking wide.
Took a lot of time off, and in order to recover,
he's huge.
And recover as fast as possible, I'm sure he spent a lot of his hard-earned money on the best PEDs that money could buy. And the UFC also wasn't testing McGregor. He's not in the USADA pool. That's why everyone was making a big deal about how is he going to compete in December 2023 when he's not even in the pool yet? And then McGregor hopped in the pool. Is he in the pool right now? I'm not sure, but I know the UFC isn't even working with.
Yes, he is in the pool right now. He's been in the pool for like half a year at this point. But yeah, he's getting tested at a pretty consistently throughout the year
with USADA
so
right
far.
Now. But the fact that he was out of the pool for so long, it's kind of obvious, especially if you pair that with him admitting it literally. He didn't say word for word, I am on PEDs, but again, let me just put it on screen. That's pretty much admitting it. So Conor's in the S tier. Does it mean he's going to be on the sauce when he comes back? Not necessarily, but he's definitely on some shit right now. Next up, Michael Chandler. I'm going to put Michael Chandler in the very suspicious tier. Now, on one hand, he doesn't have a crazy gas tank, and it is pretty...
Bro, Michael Chandler, honestly, if I'm being completely honest, I feel like he should be in the S tier. Like, Michael Chandler is one of those fighters, when you see him, he has, like, that little gut. I don't know if you guys ever pay attention to, like, IFBB pros, especially people that do, like, Mr. Olympia stuff. They got, like, a little gut. They'll have abs, right? They'll have abs, but they'll have, like a little pregnant stomach look. It's weird. And Michael Chandler has that.
Pretty believable that someone could look like Michael Chandler naturally. And if he is an MMA fighter, he's kind of like Noel, who doesn't have a crazy gas tank and usually gasses out hard. But at the same time, Michael Chandler is enormous for 155 pounds. He has a weird gut, where you do tend to see people with that.
Yes, he does have that weird gut.
That take a lot of HGH. They get like this distension in their gut. And then Michael Chandler, I mean, you just look at his physique. You look at his delts. He's just a little bit of a freak for that division. So my eyes are on Michael Chandler. I think there might be something going on there. Next up, Dricus du Plessis. I might have to put him in the very suspicious tier. Like, Dricus du Plessis is one of the best gas tanks in all of
Dricus du Plessis, he's big as hell, man.
MMA. He happens to be one of the biggest, most jacked middleweights that there is on the entire roster. He also happens to train in South Africa. I don't know if USADA loves going to South Africa. So there's that. I don't know, can one of you guys bring up an example of a fighter that's popped from that region? I'm not saying he's on stuff. I'm just saying having his gas tank to where he's not only keeping up a good pace over the course of 5 rounds, but he's also one of the only fighters that throws everything into his strikes. Like, he throws everything big to land hard. He overextends on his shots. He winds up, and he can do that for 5 rounds. And he also happens to be like massive for the middleweight division. So yeah, that's it. That's it for the tier list, guys. Now, let me once again clarify this. Edson Barboza, William Knight, okay? Some of the guys in...
Yeah, okay, let's go through this really quickly. These people up here, obviously, super highly suspicious. If these fighters have already popped, I mean, who's to say that they aren't on stuff, you know, on the off season? Some really surprising names here. Holly Holm, man. I never really thought about it. But yeah, man, like Holly Holm could definitely be like on some sort of testosterone and some estrogen blockers. Like it's crazy. Jose Aldo, I think he should be on the very suspicious list if I'm being completely honest.